welcome to the second in my series of videos on calculus. In this video, we're going to take a look at the notion of a limit. And the limit notion will underlie really everything we do for the rest of the semester. So we'll take just a little bit of time to talk about it and try to understand, conceptually at least, what's going on. So let's get started. The agenda for this video is going to be to look at the following four questions. First, what is the mathematical notion of a limit, and what role do limits play in the study of functions? Second, what is the meaning of the notation, the limit as f of x, or as x approaches a, of f of x equals L? And third, what are the three ways to compute the value of a limit of a function at a point? And last, how do we manipulate average velocity to compute instantaneous velocity, again, with the notion of a limit? And let's actually start by recalling the notion of average velocity from the previous video. We see that average velocity is given by the formula S of b minus S of a over b minus a, where S of t gives the position of some object at time t. So the average velocity is looking at the distance, or the displacement from a to b of the function, divided by the time from a to b. Similarly, we can apply this idea over smaller and smaller intervals of time to approximate instantaneous velocity. So here, h is assumed to be a small number, and as it gets closer and closer to zero, we're getting a better and better approximation of the instantaneous velocity. And really, this is the important question. What really happens to the average velocity over these smaller and smaller intervals as they get smaller and smaller? We'll take a look at this in the last example today. So let's start by defining the notion of a limit. So given a function f and a fixed input x equals a and a real number L, we say that f has the limit L as x approaches a, and we write the limit as x approaches a of f of x equals L, provided that we can take or we can make f of x as close to L as we like by taking x sufficiently close but not equal to a. If we can't make f of x as close to a single value as we would like as x approaches a, then we say that f does not have a limit as x approaches a. Now that's a mouthful, but essentially I really want to pay attention to the italicized words there. We just want to think of the limit L as the number that f of x is getting really as close as we want to, provided that we make the input x sufficiently close to x equals a. I also want to say, though, that those italicized words are a little vague and a little squishy. They can be made extremely precise. Mathematicians have worked long and hard to make sure that can be made extremely precise. And I'd encourage you to take a first course in real analysis if you'd like to learn more, or just, come talk to me. But the precise technical definition of a limit often obscures the intuition, and so we're going to focus on the intuitive idea of a limit rather than the precise technical definition. And let's explore this idea in the context of a couple of examples. So the first example that we want to look at involves the piecewise function shown on the screen. This function is defined to be x squared minus 1 over x squared plus 1 when x is not equal to negative 1, because of course at negative 1, this function is undefined. So at negative 1, f of x is defined to be 3. And the question that we want to explore is, what is the limit as x approaches negative 1 of f of x? Notice that f of negative 1 is 3. And there are three ways to estimate or compute this limit. And we'll look at all of them and see that they all ultimately agree with what the limit should be. So first, one might call this the graphical solution. So you see on the left side of your screen there a graph of the function f of x. Notice that when x is negative 1, the line has a hole in it. and the function is defined to be 3 there, and so we see that dot up at the point -1, 3. So as noticed before, f of -1 is 3, but if you're looking at what y value the line is approaching as x approaches -1, it really looks like the line is getting closer and closer to a y value of -2. And so we would say that the limit as x approaches -1 of f of x is -2. And we'll see again that the other methods for finding the limit agree with this. The graphical method is really nice for relatively simple functions that are relatively well behaved, that don't do anything too crazy. The graphical method also allows us to observe qualitative behavior, like what types of discontinuities might exist. But for more complicated functions, the graphical method is unlikely to yield exact results. So it's nice for, again, getting sort of a big picture overview of what's going on with a function and possibly confirming results that we observe using other methods, but it's unlikely to be terribly useful going forward. Another way of estimating a limit is by using a table of values. So we observe that as our inputs x get closer and closer to -1, either starting a little bit to the left of -1 with something like -1.05 or -1.01 or -1.0001, or coming from the right, looking at something like -0.99999 or -0.999, we see that the resulting outputs of f of x, given those inputs for x, seem to be getting closer and closer to -2. So it appears that the limit as x approaches -1 of f of x is -2 by looking at the table of values. Again, this is nice. It gives us sort of a clear picture in this case that it looks like it's approaching -2. But the downside is that your results are only going to be as exact as what you plug in, and what you're going to plug in as you get closer and closer to a number is probably going to be a really, really large decimal, right? Lots and lots of values after the decimal point. And so the downside of this is that deciding what the limit is kind of relies on you being able to look at a large decimal and determine what number you're really looking at. And that you can do perhaps with varying levels of precision. Again, for relatively simple functions, you probably won't be caught by surprise, but for more complicated functions, it might be hard to do. Our preferred method for computing limits will be perhaps known as an algebraic method or an analytic method. This involves actually manipulating the function in some way, simplifying the function, and then if the function is sufficiently nice, maybe it's continuous, then plugging in the value that x is approaching. And we'll actually see later, in a later video, that if f of x were continuous when x was -1, we'd be able to just plug in -1 and we get the value of the limit. But when we have discontinuities, the limit value and the function value don't have to agree. However, we can use algebra to remove the discontinuity, essentially by factoring the numerator and then canceling out the factor of x plus 1 that appears in the numerator and the denominator. And now we're just taking the limit as x approaches -1 of x minus 1. That is a continuous function, and so we can plug in -1, and the result is -2. So this is really, really nice. It's exact. There's no question that the limit is actually -2. We're not having to estimate or anything. But of course, the downside of this approach is that you need a sufficiently nice function to actually be able to do the algebraic manipulations and cancellations and all that. So all three of these methods have their strengths and weaknesses. Most of the functions that we'll be looking at will be at least continuous, if not stronger. And so this algebraic or analytic method will generally work. As one last example, I'd like to consider the problem of instantaneous velocity again. So suppose we have a particle that's moving with a position given by s of t equals t cubed. Our question is, what is its instantaneous velocity when t is 1? Well, what we saw last time was that we can compute the average velocity over smaller and smaller intervals around 1. And in fact, we can define the instantaneous velocity at t equals 1 to be the limit as h approaches 0 of the average velocity on the interval from 1 to 1 plus h. And that is really just the limit as h approaches 0 of s of 1 plus h minus s of 1 over h. Now again, we can't just plug in h equals 0 to this expression because it will become undefined, right? The numerator will be 0. It will be s of 1 minus s of 1. And the denominator will be 0 because h is 0. And 0 over 0 is indeterminate. And so we actually need to compute the limit, and we can do that by doing a bunch of algebra. We can expand 1 plus h cubed, which is s of 1 plus h. And what we get is h cubed plus 3h squared plus 3h plus 1. And we're still subtracting 1 because s of 1 is 1 cubed, which is 1. And those 1's cancel. And now everything in the numerator has an h. And so I can factor that h out. And then I can cancel the h from the numerator and denominator. And now I just have a nice polynomial expression. It's continuous, and it turns out that then I can just plug 0 in for h, and I get a limit of 3. So when t equals 1, the instantaneous velocity of this particle is 3. So that's just a little bit about the notion of a limit. We tried to get a big idea of what a limit is and how we can compute limits using both a graphical method, a table of values, and when the functions are sufficiently nice, an algebraic method. And we also tried to make a connection right at the end to instantaneous and average velocity. We see that the instantaneous velocity is a limit of the average velocity. So in the next video, we will explore that notion of instantaneous velocity or instantaneous rate of change more in depth by looking at the idea of the derivative. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.